All right, we have watched this video on this a bit problematic research carried out by this scientist in China. Well, I know that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we cannot carry out a face-to-face interaction in this class, but I would like you to think by yourself. Take some time to think about, when watching this video, what do you think about this video, especially when you were hearing about the discussions around the ethics, the potential ethical problems or issues that this research may bring. There were quite a number of discussions in this video talking about the potential risks, that nobody knows what the risks would be if the babies were true, that there were these twins whose gene has been edited. Okay, so here I just want to make you be aware of some potential issues that a research may bring, and some potential ethical considerations that we as a researcher, as a ethical researcher, we need to think about, well, even far before we plan out our research. Okay, so this is just the intro. Okay. Right, about the definition of research ethics. Well, ethics itself, if we do not restrain ethics in the research domain, ethics itself is a quite broad term. It can refer to a lot of areas. And the basic meaning of ethics is the study of a right behavior, or what should be the correct way of doing things, and it can be applied in different areas, and research is one of them. Here I have put two quotations of the definition of ethics in research. The first definition focuses on its kind of core of its core, which refers to the right behavior, or the standard of the right behavior that the researcher should bear in mind when they are planning out their research and throughout the whole process of the research. Whereas the second definition focuses more on the responsibility of the researcher, as well as taking the characteristic of the personality of the researcher as well, and that the researcher should be honest, should be the researcher's integrity should be good. Okay, and in these definitions, these two definitions are not contradictory, they supplement each other. Basically, what we can see here is, so the ethics refer to the right behavior, the standard of what is considered to be the right behavior as a researcher when we plan our research, when we conduct our research, or even after we finish our research, when we are thinking about publication, for example, publicize our research either in an academic audience like a journal article or book, or when we think about publishing our research into a wider audience, like to the public. There are various of outcomes that this may lead to. We'll talk about these later in our lecture. Okay, here's some background about research ethics. a very, very famous milestone in research ethics is the Nuremberg Code. It was a set of kind of first, it was not the first, but the first formal and worldwide known set of standards for scientific research on what can be done and what shouldn't be done on scientific experiment. That came out. This code was developed from some ethical experiments which were done to the concentration camp prisoners during the Second World War. Later, there are also quite a few famous ethical experiments. I have put 3 of them in the slides for your interest. The first one is the Milgram experiment on electricity shock. That there are 2 groups of participants. One is to answer questions and one is to receive punishment. So if the person who answered the question make a mistake, and the other person who received punishment would be shocked by electricity. And the more mistakes the first person made, the being punished person would get higher and higher value of electricity shock. So it was, by the time the experiment was taken, and there wasn't a formal restriction on such experiments. But now when we look back on such experiment, it sounds quite scary, isn't it? If you want to know more about these experiments or these problematic research, you're welcome to do so. You can search them in your favorite search engine and look at what were involved in those experiments and what debate has been brought out of these experiments after they were taken. So these 3 experiments were famous not only because of the content of the experiment itself, but also because these experiments has helped move forward the ethical regulations. So now we have kind of a wider coverage of ethical codes on what we can do and what we should not do as a researcher. Okay, so after reviewing some of these definitions and these background stories, I want to make you aware of a question on why ethical considerations is necessary for research. Well, one of the kind of most obvious answer would be we need ethical codes or ethical regulations to protect our participants, isn't it? We do not want to harm our participants. And there are different types of harms, and which we will talk about it later. Well, you are open to think about your own answer on why do you think ethical considerations or ethical concerns should be conducted for any kind of research. Why ethics is important for research. And here I have listed out a number of ethical guidelines carried out by various research associations or research councils. Well, for your master's dissertation, I think most of you probably do not need to go into each of them and follow the guidelines here, because I don't think most of our dissertations would involve such societies or associations. But I just want you to be aware that these are mostly applied to us as academics. When we carried out research, we need to follow a lot of ethical codes and guidelines. And for you, I have put out a link here on what a student in this university should take, what you should look at, what you should follow on ethical codes as a student in this university. So here, after today's lecture, please click on this link and have a look at the university-wide guidelines on ethical codes. And later in today's lecture, in the third part of the lecture, I'm also going to talk about some more details of what you should bear in mind when you are conducting your dissertation. Your dissertation is a piece of research, isn't it? So when you're conducting your dissertation, what are the detailed things that you should take into account in terms of ethics? All right, and I will see you in part 2.